Well, good morning, everybody. Has everybody had enough coffee? All right, we're ready to roll. Bill, let's go.
Well, Governor, thank you for being here. This is a wonderful gathering of folks that are very much consistent with your background, and I thought it might be helpful to just start off by telling a little bit about your life story and what brought you to become governor, but your upbringing and other things.
Well, we'll get through that quickly, but first of all, thank you for letting me join you. I have heard about this gathering for over a decade, and our Secretary of Education, Amy Gadara, is here, and I want everybody to give her a round of applause because she is a national leader in what she does. And of course, our current Superintendent of Public Education, we found here. She was in Arizona, and we stole her. And now Emily Ann Gullickson is leading K through 12 education along with early childhood education in Virginia, and we are so thankful for all of you to have great people who we can recruit to come to Virginia. Listen, my story is very quick. I grew up in Virginia. I'm homegrown. I grew up with a mother who just instilled in me an absolute passion for education. My mom was a nurse, but she was also an educator. And I vividly remember her staying up late at night with such commitment to a single student, to a student who was struggling, to a moment where she could engage in a different way. And I just watched the impact that she had on her students, and I watched the impact she had on my life. And so I was very early on instilled with this passion for education and the difference that it can make in one child's life. You couple that with the fact that I am not a career politician by any means. I had a business career for 30 years, and I thought I had reached my dream job. I had grown up, as I said, in a pretty normal American family, ups and downs. My dad lost his job twice during middle school and high school, and we had to move and remake our family. And I had a chance to play basketball in college. I had a chance to go to graduate school. I had a chance to have a career and lead a company that I never thought I would ever have that opportunity. And I thought I was in my dream job. And then I had a real wake-up call in my own prayer life. And I felt a real strong call to quit my job and run for governor in Virginia. Now, I have a warning for all of you that if you have that moment, which my wife calls my midlife crisis, you need to tell your spouse before you do it. And so when Suzanne and I had a moment in the middle of COVID in July, and I asked her to go on a walk with me, and she looked incredibly fearful. What is wrong? And I told her that I was going to quit my job and run for governor. As the tears filled her eyes and her lip quivered, she said, "Governor of what?" And I said, "My beloved Virginia." And what a journey it has been. And what an honor it is to go to work every day. There is not a morning where I don't wake up and first am so grateful for the opportunity to serve, for the experience set that I bring, which is just different, and the people that have come around us to really both serve and lead transformation in the Commonwealth of Virginia on so many important fronts, with education being at the top of the list. And so, Bill, thank you. Thank you for your service. For those of you that don't know, I recruited Bill to serve on our State Board of Education, and he has been one of the stalwarts who has helped us transform what we're doing in Virginia. But on top of that, I just recruited him to go sit on the board of one of our great four-year institutions of higher education, George Mason. And so with all the other things you have going on, thanks for helping make the Commonwealth of Virginia the best state to live, work, raise a family, and get an education.
Thank you, Governor. It's an honor. And I just, even going back 4 years to your campaign, this was personal to me as well. I've got 6 children. I've been in Virginia for 60 years and 17 grandchildren. And with all of the COVID...
Can they all vote? 17 voters, that's a good thing.
One's close. Trying to get a pipeline for you. But this really was personal in terms of what we were coming through with the pandemic and the learning loss. And even had one of my daughters homeschool her children because of some of the challenges that we were facing. And I think there was a seminal moment on the campaign when the focus really became on parents and not the system. And just maybe take us back a little bit of 4 years of how the education issue really, I think, catapulted you into the...
I hate to do this for everybody because I think we are so grateful to have the pandemic behind us. But what we learned during that period, I think, is so important we don't forget. And therefore, let me just back everybody up. I'm going to take you back to the summer of 2020 and into 2021, and particularly what was going on in our schools. In Virginia, we had a policy coming from government to keep our schools closed. We were 46th in the nation in getting our schools back open. Children were being told that a quality education was a 12-inch screen. And in fact, that parents and students were being told that their students were doing well in that environment. And that is the foundation. And that is why when parents had, for the first time, maybe ever, had a kitchen table side view of what was going on in their child's education, we saw parents in Virginia and parents all over the country stand up and say, we must do better. We must do better. And I do believe that that moment is a moment that we must continue to embrace, because the lack of transparency, the lack of expectations of excellence, the lack of accountability is exactly at the heart of what we're going to be talking about this morning, and I know all of you talk about all the time, is that it was a moment where, not just because of the pandemic, but because of decisions that had been made in the Commonwealth of Virginia over a period of 5 and 10 years before, were now manifesting themselves in a severe lack of performance, academic achievement, social development, and yes, it was starting to show up really in a big honesty gap. The honesty gap of how our students were doing on national tests, the NAEP scores, and how they were doing on watered-down state tests. And now it was clear that not only were our students not proficient, they were rapidly declining in their proficiency, even though it wasn't near what it needed to be. Now, I also want to make a very clear statement. This is not about the passion and commitment of teachers, because what we saw during that time period was Herculean efforts by teachers to do anything they could come up with in order to try to stimulate a 7-year-old on a Zoom call to pay attention and to learn to read. This was about expectations of excellence that had been watered down over a long period of time. And what do I mean by that? In Virginia, where we historically had the highest expectations for proficiency, over a period of time, they were watered down, and Virginia became the state with the lowest expectations for proficiency. And in fact, even the Washington Post, that doesn't agree with me very much, said, I can't believe Virginia's doing this. And so all of a sudden, the expectations on our children changed materially. And let me just be clear. The kids were meeting these low expectations. The words soft bigotry of low expectations couldn't be more true, because the groups of students that in fact fell furthest behind were our minority students in Virginia, Black students, Hispanic students, students with disabilities. And that was the moment where this transparency of parents' ability to see what was going on in the classroom became so real. And that's when we all stood up together and said, we must transform this. We must reestablish expectations of excellence that we can not only lift the floor, we can take off the ceiling. We must have good, accurate data that tells us how our children are doing. We must share that data with parents so they can understand really how their children are doing. And we must be able to see how schools are doing so that that transparent data can translate into accountability. And if we start down this path aggressively, then we can do something that not only must be done, but I firmly believe that we can lead a movement of excellence, transparency, accountability, and finally, the single most important measure, results. And that's what we started with this election in 2021, was a holistic statement, not Republicans versus Democrats, but parents, Democrat parents, independent parents, Republican parents, standing up and saying, we must have better outcomes for our kids. And that's what we walked into in 2022.
And Governor, just maybe extending off of that, when I joined the state board your first year, you really charged us with some important things. One is to create the best standards in our country for history, computer science, also to get our accountability framework in place, and also on the issue of school choice with the lab school creation that you were able to work through the legislature. But just love a little bit of color around any of those three priorities that we really were focused on from day one.
So all of you have been working your careers at these topics. I first start with the theme of this conference, learning at light speed. 670 miles per hour is light speed. If we are learning at light speed, but we're 5 or 10% off of our course in an hour, we're going to be absolutely in the wrong place, in the wrong solar system. And so we have to know where we are, really. Where do we start? And that required us to embrace transparency. Let's not try to sugarcoat this. How are our schools doing? How are our students doing? And let's be transparent. Not to condemn, not to belittle, but to know where we are. And that was our first big step. We made a promise to Virginia families and our commitment to Virginia families that transparency was where we were going to start. And it wasn't pretty. Literally 2/3 of Virginia's middle school and elementary school students are not proficient in math and reading. 2/3. And so we had to go to work and say, first and foremost, we've got to address proficiency. But then the second piece of this, and I'll come back to some of the programs and policies that we put in place. The second part of this journey was to establish a destination. And the destination had to be excellence. If we don't expect a lot out of our children, we will not get a lot out of them. And so basically redoing standards and expectations became a top priority. I told the team I want the very best history standards in the nation. I want us to tell the good and the bad. We have to have the best reading standards, the best math standards, the best science standards, the best computer science standards, which, by the way, we now are said to have had, and we're one of the few states that has AI as part of our computer science standards. We must have the best expectations. Then we have to have a system of judging how far away we are from those expectations and communicating that to parents and understanding where our schools are. And that required us to first develop a methodology to communicate with parents. And today, if you're a parent in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you can go on a portal and it is password protected, and you can download how your child is doing. It's fully transparent. And can you imagine the difference in parent-teacher conferences when parents come armed with all the data about their own child? And then finally, we had to overhaul our accreditation system. And bluntly, accreditation was a box-ticking exercise. I asked a very basic question. How can 2/3 of our middle and elementary school students not be proficient in reading and math, and yet only 10% of our schools are non-accredited or on the needs real work list? That can't be. And so we went back and we split our accreditation system into 2 buckets. You're accredited if you have all of the factors necessary in order to operate a school: an emergency evacuation plan, good financial controls, the lines in the parking lot are right. But we have to have a performance assessment and support system that says, how are you doing? How are you doing with mastery? How are you doing with growth? And how are you doing preparing a student to be ready for life? And let's go back and rejumble the characterizations of our schools into distinguished, on plan, off plan, and needs a lot of help. And what we found is over 35% of our schools are in the bottom two categories. And again, this is not judgment, this is knowing where we are. But that whole journey of excellence in expectations, of transparency, of making the data available to parents and to schools, and then working to make sure schools know where they are, and then putting together an entire set of action plans in order to close that gap was the critical function of the last 3 years. Where are we? Where are we going? And how do we close the gap? And I have to say that I have watched the resistance from the established groups who didn't want any of this begin to melt away. Why? Because one, transparency is so important. Data is hard to refute. We have to know where we are. But second of all, this is not a moment of shaming and demeaning. It's a moment then to send resources where they're needed. And so at the top of our list was to close the learning loss. Coming out of the pandemic, Virginia had the largest learning loss in 4th grade and 8th grade math and reading in the entire country. I'm going to say that again. The Commonwealth of Virginia, whose schools are truly appropriately lauded, had the largest learning loss in the nation in 4th grade and 8th grade reading and math. We had to go to work. Now, for those of you that don't know Virginia politics, we have divided government. We've always had divided government. We have a General Assembly that's controlled by the Democrats. I'm a Republican governor, and we figure it out. And I went to our leadership in the House and the Senate, and I said, we got to figure this out. And we collectively committed to over $400 million in a program we called All in Virginia. And it was intensive tutoring for 3rd through 8th graders. Because guess what? They had been kindergartners and 5th graders during the pandemic, and they had lost or never gained any of the big building blocks. And we had a massive effort to tackle chronic absenteeism. And all of a sudden, we grabbed an all-of-the-above approach. If there is an intensive tutoring online platform that works, we'll take it. We're going to drive small group tutoring in the mornings and the evenings, on the weekends. We're going to allow educators to do what they do best, which is teach children. We're also going to embark on getting kids back in the classroom, particularly those that are chronically absent. And what we found very quickly is that the ideas exist. It's just a matter of execution. And so before we knew it, we as in Virginia now are one of the top states in the reduction of chronic absenteeism. Kids are back in the classroom. Before we knew it, after a little bit of hesitation, by January 2024, we had the entire state running intensive tutoring. And that is the big step in rebuilding the foundation. And then we went to work to say, hey, let's create multiple pathways for students so they can pursue their passions. And that requires a whole different model of thinking. First choice for parents. And I have to say, I am a huge advocate for empowering parents to choose the educational pathway that is best suited for their child, based on their child's needs. But we also have to go to work to create those pathways and that customized, not one-size-fits-all educational experience in the public school system. And so we've gone to work with lab schools. We've gone to work with career and technical education pathways. We've gone to work to changing block schedules so we don't have time and seat requirements so that students can actually choose the course load that best matches their needs. And yet, we still are one of only 8 states in the nation that has a testing requirement for graduation. And as long as I'm governor, that's going to stay there because that means that students are ready for graduation and ready for life. And so, Bill, this journey, which you've been such a part of, and thank you, is one of comprehensive transformation about the way we think about education. And again, these are not buzzwords. They are the foundational principles of excellence, of transparency, of accountability, and results. And we have to pursue those with unwavering commitment. Now, the last thing I will say, and I'll go back to you because I've just sucked up the entire time, but is we have to innovate along the way. And if we aren't embracing new ideas, if we're not embracing things that work other places and adopting them quickly and calling them our own, then we are going to be locked into the status quo. And so anybody who works with me knows that I am up for trying it. Let's give it a try and see if it works. And let's have rapid cycle time to see if we are getting results out of that effort. And if we are, then let's populate across the state. And that's exactly what we have done in intensive tutoring. It's where the chronic absenteeism effort started. Candidly, it's where cell phone free education started, all with an idea that we can change outcomes. Let's run a really tight, focused test. If it works, let's share it across the Commonwealth. I am really excited about where things stand, but I have to tell you, we all know the data. If we don't do dramatic things in order to change the direction of proficiency, mastery of topics in America, we are not going to meet the needs of our children. We are not going to unlock their opportunities. And finally, our nation is not going to thrive.
Thank you, Governor. And we had a state board meeting a few weeks ago, and at our lunch, we had 4 of the teachers of the year with us, and they universally, we went around the room and asked them what the most important topic was, and one was the cell phone policy, so thank you for your courage and your leadership on that. Coming from the teachers, they said kids are actually looking at them in the eye, engaging with their fellow students, but also talked about the deregulation efforts, and maybe just a minute on what you've done in the Commonwealth across the board, but more importantly on education.
I just can't emphasize enough the importance of giving students the ability to be students. And cell phone free education is such a cornerstone of addressing the mental health challenges in our young people, the academic challenges in our young people, and the relational challenges in our young people. And so this was a big step. We issued an executive order last summer, and we gave 1 month of design, 1 month of feedback, and then we issued the final executive order by September 15th. By the time we got to the final executive order, we had over 100 of our school divisions out of 132 that had already adopted cell phone free education policies. They wanted it. They just needed support to get it done. And then we just codified in our General Assembly session on bipartisan basis the executive order now into state law. I do think there's an important comment here. I was just up in Menlo Park in Silicon Valley yesterday working on recruiting technology and data centers and AI and everything into Virginia because we are truly the data center capital of the world. And this is not an indictment of technology. It is a recognition that we need to embrace technology and education in a way that focuses on education and removes all the bad stuff. And I have to say, I was just in one of our great high schools that has embraced cell phone education for more than just the last year. And I was there with Secretary Kennedy, and we had about 100 students in front of us. And he said, okay, we're going to take a vote. How many of you would like to get the cell phones back into the school? And out of the roughly 100 children or 100 kids, 1 raised their hand out of 100. And of course, we asked him, so what would you like? And he said, well, I'm worried that my mom might need to get in touch with me during the day, and she likes to text me on my phone. And one of the teachers immediately jumped in and said, she can call the office and we'll hand you a note. These are really basic things to address. And yet, you can embrace technology in learning while removing all of the distractions, all of the bullying, all of the mental health challenges, and I think we're going to see massive, massive improvements. We've also worked to deregulate. One of the big things that I pushed for was to deregulate everything by 25%. One of the biggest ones that we've been working on is removing state mandates for things like seat time and providing flexibility for our local school divisions to be able to design pathways that can match students' needs. And I have to say, we have a very, very diverse state. Rural areas where agriculture is the biggest economic driver, and other areas where data centers are the biggest economic driver. And they should have the flexibility to design some curriculum that meets their local needs. Critically important, and I think this empowers people at the local level in a way that is most necessary in order to reach excellence.
Governor, it's just a privilege to be part of this wonderful journey that you're on, and just really look to you as the education governor in our country, and especially I think in light of the changes going on in Washington and looking to the states to be the focal point with parents and their children's education. But just thank you for the opportunity to be part of this with you, but also I don't know if you want to have a final comment here.
Great. Well, I again want to thank everybody for letting me join you. I have said recently to the administration that Virginia's ready, and if you want to shift, which I think you should, full responsibility for educating our children through block grants to the states, we're ready. We're ready to go. We're ready to seek excellence. We're ready to have great transparency. We know how to use that to be accountable for results, and I think Virginia students are going to soar as a result. I invite any of you to help us on some of our bigger challenges. I would love to have faster cycle time on results for children. To take tests in the fall, in the spring, and then get results 6 months or 9 months later doesn't help us. At the speed of light, you can end up in the wrong place. I also want to work to make sure we are identifying earlier in a child's academic journey those things that are most interesting to them, their biggest passion, so that a customized education pathway can be unlocked. And so all of you literally major in these topics. And so we are inviting you, please come to Virginia and help us do a better job with data and with transparency, and as a result, guidance to support families so that our children can, yes, receive that quality education, that excellent education that unlocks opportunity for them. God bless you, and thank you. Thank you.